I'm sure all of you have done simple weaving with straight pieces of paper. Let me show you how we can vary it. These two examples that I'm showing you now have been done from simple construction paper in which we have changed the shape of the papers we've woven. Some are curved, some angular. We also will be showing you how to weave with foils to get a wonderful shiny design. It looks very festive, almost like ribbons. Let's begin with the most basic of all paper weaving. I've cut a series of white strips of paper and a series of magenta paper strips. You will notice when I laid these out on the table, I used a small piece of masking tape to hold them in place. And notice also that I left a small gap between them. This makes the weaving much easier, and the masking tape holds them so they don't wiggle around. And we'll carefully remove it at the end. Let's begin. I'll take my first strip. I'm going to slide it under the second, lift up, lift up. You notice I did over, under, over, under, over, under. The next strip that we add will be the exact opposite. We'll go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. And we'll kind of slide those together. See the pattern already being created? We'll do the successive steps the same way. You notice that some of my strips are thicker than others, and that's okay. Some people like the variation. Other people like every strip to be the same. It's a matter of choice. Let's do a few more. As you can see, the process doesn't take long, and the results are quite interesting. Now that we've woven all our strips together, we need to do some pushing together and tightening of the design itself. We begin by removing the tape at the bottom. And when you do that, you need to pull it gently. Occasionally you may get a little tear at the end, but that's okay. Just move it slowly and carefully. You will not get a tear if you put the tape on really lightly. Now we'll be able to move our strips. You start by pushing the strips into the center, like so, and tightening in this manner. We want to get all the light holes out. Turn it around, and then we'll start putting the red ones in closely, like this. Once we get them this way, then we can start moving them in again this way. And it's a matter of just pushing and tightening, pushing and tightening, till we get the desired effect. If one gets out of alignment, we can even them up. There we go. So that they're nice and straight. And as we lift it up, you'll see that it's a tight weave with no air holes. We can put a drop of glue under each strip, like so that it doesn't wiggle free. Once this is done, you turn the weave over and glue the spots on this side. Now that it's all glued down, basically the weaving is done. But look at these kind of ragged edges. We can really make our weaving look great by having some fun with the edges. Using our scissors, we can use a variety of techniques to make the edges look terrific. We can make cuts like this and create fringe. This looks interesting, but we can do other things. We can angle. So not only do we have fringe, we have an angled edge. A lot more interesting than just this. Okay, that finishes this off. Now, let's use a variety of foil strips to create a weaving with the same basic technique. Let's begin. I'm going to set up my strips of paper along the bottom. And I think I'll alternate the colors that I will use. A green, red, blue, gold. You'll notice that some of the strips have variations of lengths, and that's okay. They can be uniform, or you can change them. I like these. Yeah, that looks terrific. And a few more. Another green, blue, and a red. And we'll tape them down so they don't wiggle around on us. Make sure to line them up, leaving some space between them. And using our masking tape, we'll tape the edges down. I'm going to touch it just really lightly, just enough to hold them in place. And we'll start weaving. I think I'll weave with silver and gold. Under, over, under, over. Same technique we used before. I cut these strips from a large roll of colored foil paper. I used a paper cutter to do this, but you can use scissors or an X-Acto knife if you wish. You will notice that these strips are not uniform in width. Some are wide, some are narrow. I like that variation personally, but some people might like to have all the strips exactly the same size. To do that, you can mark off on the back of the paper with a pencil to get the exact width. It's a matter of personal choice. Okay, I'm finished weaving with this. You will notice there's a longer edge here than here, and I would like to center it, so let me show you how you can do that. First off, you need to remove the tape again from the bottom, and if I peel it very carefully, you have to hold them in place so they don't pop out. There we go. Now you notice again we have uneven edges. We want to move it toward the center. So this is how we do that. Let's get all of these lined up edgewise, and we're going to move these again in this direction. Notice the spaces and how I'm closing the spaces up. You don't want the spaces to be there. There we go. Now we'll glue the edges down as we did in the previous weaving. Now that everything's glued, we're going to do something with the edges. Since this looks sort of like ribbon, let's make a ribbon cut at the edge. We can angle it in like this and like this, and it looks like ribbons. I love this cut. Sort of looks like the ribbon that hangs off a medal. You'll notice that some are shorter than others, and that makes it quite interesting at the edge. So 2 cuts per edge makes a wonderful ribbon cut. Okay, we're finished. I'm now going to show you how to take this white sheet of paper and add paint to it to create interesting surfaces that we can weave. I'll start with white paint, dribble a little bit of green. This is the fun part. A little bit of turquoise. A little bit of magenta. And then we'll use a brush to move it around to create some interesting designs that we can weave. Use your brush and blend. Don't overdo it. Make sure also that the edges are done. I usually do the edges first because you don't want all that white paper showing. You get some wonderful blends of color, like this. can be very creative and swirl. I'm now going to add a few drops of acrylic gold or tempera gold, whichever you wish, and brush that in to the design. Put it on a drying rack, outside or in. When it's dry, you can cut it into strips and weave, which we'll do next. Our painted white paper is now dry, so let's turn it over so that we can mark off the width of our strips that we'll cut to make our weaving. I'd like these strips to be approximately an inch wide, so we'll mark these off and then we'll cut. If you do not want your strips to be uniform in width, you could use a paper cutter to cut them. Now that the lines have all been made, we'll cut on the lines and then stack up the strips. I like to stack the strips up in the order in which they've been cut. This continues the pattern of the paint and makes it very interesting when they're woven together. We finished cutting all of our strips, and I have them stacked in order. Now we're going to lay down approximately half of the strips to do our weaving. Let's do it like this. Again, notice that we leave a little space between each one. And notice by stacking them up, my pattern continues. Since we used paper that was 18 by 24 inches, we should have approximately 24 1-inch strips of paper. Let's use 11 of those strips along the bottom and weave the others in. Again, we will use masking tape along the bottom to hold the strips into place. It's important right here, since it is a painted surface, that the masking tape be applied lightly so that it doesn't rip off the painted surface. But the edges should be down nice and tight. Notice that I have left room in between for weaving. Let's begin weaving as we've done with the others. Now we're finishing off this weaving, and we'll use the same process as before. We will remove the tape gently and begin to push the pieces together to get rid of these gaps. Let's do that now. Let's begin closing up these gaps by moving all the pieces and strips of paper in toward the center, like so. And we move in this way until we get a good tight weave. If we like this look here, we can leave it, or we can move it and change it to bring out certain colors. Now we see the gold here. We can move this around to bring out more color here, or perhaps slide one this way to bring out more colors in this area. This gives us a lot of options that we didn't have in the others. Isn't that great? Once we get the colors where we like them, we do a final tightening up, and then we'll glue the edges down. That's the last gluing, and we'll flip it over. And again, we'll cut the edges. I think in this area we'll cut one this way and one this way. Have some fun with the different angles. Let me show you how we can display these so they're even more dazzling. You can glue it directly onto a backboard, such as this black foam core. Let me show you a couple more that I have done. the same way. You'll notice how bright this one is. And the last one I'll show you is one that was done with pastels. Notice how muted it is compared to the paint, but still quite dazzling. We're now going to weave within the boundaries of one sheet of paper. Our weaving will be framed within this 1-inch border. First off, we will need to cut lines this way across that we can weave through, creating a warp. There are a couple of ways of doing this. I can get an X-Acto knife and make exact lines, or I can use the scissors. And to do the scissors, we'll do it like this. You're going to take your paper, hold the ends together gently like this, and with our scissors, we're going to cut along this 1-inch border that we've made to the edge. And then we'll cut lines over to the edge again. When we open it, you can see where we're going to do our weave. Since I took 1 inch off here and 1 inch off here, this green sheet of paper that we're going to weave in should be 2 inches shorter so that it will fit. We'll take our ruler and mark 2 inches off right now and cut that away so that it will fit. This should fit right inside that area. We're going to make straight lines on this one. When you do this project, it's best to cut one at a time and then weave. Over, under, like this, all the way to the top. And push the edges in, like so. Now we've come to the end of the weave, but it looks kind of uneven here. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to lift this top piece up and make my border have a smooth edge at the top. Look at these designs. Or look at this one too. These are very jagged and these are curved. Let me show you how easy it is to do these stunning variations of the simple checkerboard weave. I've marked off my 1-inch border again, and I'm going to create my lines in which we will weave. This time I'm going to use an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to make interesting little curves instead of straight lines. Little waves. You can make some areas big and some small. Don't get too carried away, but it is fun. X-Acto knives can be used. They're a little more rapid, but you can use scissors to do this. All our strips have been cut. All we have to do now is weave in and out. And to do that, we're going to use orange this time, and we're going to cut it the same kind of a wavy motion. Let's begin. I'm working with an X-Acto knife, and this is actually a razor blade atop a handle. So if you're going to use this one, you must be very, very careful. Always have your hands away from the direction that you're cutting. You don't want to cut yourself. It's also a good idea to make sure you lay it aside so that your hand won't accidentally bump into it when you're not cutting. And when you cut, it's a good idea to have a piece of cardboard underneath to protect the surface you're cutting. I'm getting ready to cut the last piece that will fit in here. I want it to fit so we have a nice border, and this is the way we do it. You line your paper up tightly against where it's going to fit. Notice where your line is, right here. I'll make a tiny cut. Then pull out my ruler and I will make a line to show where my cut should be. Now that it's all glued down, let's look at the final product. Notice those wavy lines. This is an action weave. I'm now going to show you how to do one that has a jagged edge. It's very similar to the one we just did with the curved edges, but just a little bit of a twist. Let's do this one in black and white. I'll start with my white line here, and I want to make sure with my ruler that I'm going to have a 1-inch border at the top and at the bottom. We're going to create the warp that we're going to weave with. Those are the lines we weave in and out of. I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to follow right along that line and stop approximately there. That will give you a nice even border, but the lines in between are going to be jagged like this. And we'll open it up, bend our folds back so we have a nice even surface, and you can see the jagged area we've created. And we're going to weave jagged strips into this jagged warp. We'll take our black and start like this. And we'll weave one strip at a time again because we want them to match. There is a temptation to cut several jagged edges or curved edges at once. Save yourself some time and do it one at a time, because if you do several strips thinking you're saving time, you won't be, because then you'll be trying to figure out which one goes next. So do them one at a time. You can already see the jagged pattern that's beginning. Voila, the finished product. The last type of paper weaving I'll show you today is done within a given shape. I took a piece of purple construction paper and cut out the outline shape of a fish. Making a series of cuts down through the fish itself to create a warp, I took red paper and wove it in and out to create a weave of this fish. This is easy to do. You can see from the back how we glued off the edges just as we did in the rectangular shape weave. I've cut out a heart and we're going to weave within it. On the back, I've already lined off areas 1 inch apart where I will make my cuts in which we will weave. Let's do that now. You may use an X-Acto knife or a scissors, whichever you wish. I have gone ahead and cut red strips rather narrow that I will weave in and out. Since this is a heart that has a center pattern, let's start in the middle and work out. Again, over, under, over, under, over, under. Look how terrific that looks. Wouldn't that be a great Valentine? In this video, we've shown you the variations of weaving with paper strips to get stunning and unusual results. It's your turn now to weave. So get out the paper and your materials, and don't forget to use your imagination and have some fun.